Hello.
Hi, everybody. John Brownstone
Kayla
Kayla Lords.
Just not knowing how cameras work or when to speak or when to do anything. You know, another day here at Loving BDSM.
Brain fart.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're back.
Yes, we are.
Episode 151.
Mm-hmm.
This is your topic.
Pretty much.
You were like very determined that we would talk about this topic.
I know.
If you didn't read the headline we're talking about. Headline? Title?
Title.
The word? The thing?
Consistency.
Consistency. I have forgotten how video cameras and speaking work. I'm
consistent. I'm here every week.
I am also consistent, and I am also here every week.
That you are.
Yes. In all of my glory. Every week. So we're going to talk about being consistent this week.
Yes.
You're going to talk about being consistent this week.
We're going to talk about being consistent.
Yeah, we know I'm going to talk.
You know how I talk.
I do, and then I fill in the gaps.
Yes, you do.
Right. So we're going to do that.
Okay.
So let's get into it.
All right.
I'm pimping our kinky fuckery shop.
Cool.
Reminding people that it exists.
Yeah.
Saying, hey, do you have a kinky person in your life whom you would like to do kinky fuckery with? Does that kinky fuckery include impact play?
Woo.
We got you covered.
Yes, we do.
If you go to shop.kaylalords.com, you can actually see everything we make and sell. So I have a few books, ebooks there. You have all of your kinky fuckery things.
Canes, paddles,
Butt plugs,
wooden
butt plugs. No, you do not have to worry about splinters.
No.
No, you do not. But it is all there. It is available. You're going to be adding new stuff.
Yeah.
Hopefully for November, we will have a special that has been promised for the past 2 months.
Yes.
And then we will continue with specials. Moving forward.
I'm finally, I've worked out a few kinks in the shop.
I think, isn't the whole shop kinky though?
Well,
isn't that the point?
Yeah.
That's the point, I think.
Yep.
Okay. So, but you've worked out the non-kinky kinks, the non-consensual kinks.
The non-consensual kinks, yes.
Gotcha.
I've worked out the non-consensual kinks. And matter of fact, yesterday and today, I was working on making paddles.
You were. And
I've got a dozen paddles that are cut out and sanded. And
that's a good start. A dozen.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you like the hitty things, that's
Yeah.
a dozen is a good place to start. But more is good. I like more.
I know. You like that one. I got a piece of hardwood.
Yes, I want you to make more paddles like that.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm going to advocate for. So most of the paddles that are on the shop, if you are a person who is into impact play, they can be made thuddy, but they're mostly on the stinging side. And the one you just made on a whim and practiced on my ass, it's very thuddy.
Very thuddy.
So for those spankos who enjoy thuddy impact, I am advocating for us to get a very, very heavy, very thuddy paddle. So as soon as that happens, I will let you know. Don't worry, I got your back, or your ass, or that. Okay.
Yeah.
We are only in the commercial portion of the show, and we are already completely off the fucking rails.
Of course we are. We wouldn't be we if we weren't.
No, we wouldn't be we. We also don't speak the grammar good. That's okay. We had to do the intro how many times? I don't know.
I know.
Yeah, it's one of those weeks. Okay.
Oh, yes, it is.
So we are talking about consistency.
Correct.
And this is your idea. Every time we've sat down in the past probably 6 months to plan topics, you've been put this on the list. This is totally on the list. We're talking about this. And I've always been okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because from my perspective, and part of the point I definitely want us to get across in this discussion is that while consistency tends to fall on the shoulders of the dominant, submissives have a responsibility to it as well. But you are, in general, most of the time so consistent. I recognize it as a concept and I support the concept, but my little submissive brain goes, huh? What are we talking about? I'm just gonna do what I'm told, and won't that be good and easy? So this is definitely a you topic.
Right. And I know that as you just said, I'm so consistent that when I'm not consistent,
then I have something to say.
You're like, are you feeling okay? Is something wrong?
Well, and that, I think that would be the very first point, so that it's both sides of the slash here, right? So yeah, it's kind of on the dominant to be the consistent one if you're going to be the leader, and that's the responsibility you're going to take, right? I think that that's your premise, is this is your job as a dominant to be consistent.
It's job as the leader in the relationship. Yes.
Right. But from a submissive perspective, if your dominant is not being consistent, either because they just almost never have been, or because they usually are and now they're not, you, in my mind, have every right to speak up and go, whoa, what's happening here? And sometimes, like in our case, it happens when something's going on. Maybe we've got an issue we haven't talked about, or maybe there's something just going on. And we've talked about this in the past, when things just kind of you get complacent and you let things slide. You know, there comes a point where, at least from my perspective, as a submissive, I'm missing what we've got.
True. And
I can't dominate myself. So, yeah, you know, when we talk about this
self-domination,
it's not my jam.
Doesn't sound like a thing.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it is a thing, but it's not my thing. Yeah. But while we're talking about consistency, and we are putting a big onus on the dominant in this conversation, I think it's worthwhile to remember, as a submissive, that you have a responsibility here too, and that responsibility may be to just speak up and say, hey, this isn't working, what's going on, how can I help, what do we need to do, what's the problem, whatever it might be. But this isn't a completely one-sided concept.
No, it's not. The concept of consistency swings both ways.
Oh, it swings, huh? That sounds like fun. Yeah, I'm already off the rails. We're like not even 10 minutes in, and I'm like, just... So we'll start with, we did do a blog post this week.
Correct. Which
I wrote, but you definitely had to help with, because I was like, this is what I think it means. What do you think? And so a lot of input from you. And it is about why consistency is important. What happens positively in your relationship when the dominant is consistent between you. And that, I'm sure we might add more to it in this conversation, but that's pretty much if you're wondering why the hell it matters, that blog post link is in the show notes. You can go check that out. It does a lot of positive things. And when you don't have consistency, the opposite is true. It does some very negative things for your relationship. Correct. But since this is your thing,
my thing,
and you feel very strongly about it.
Okay.
So can you talk about why you feel that consistency is so important?
Well, several reasons for that. And I would have to say, first off, that as a big D, one of the things that matters most to a submissive, especially in a power exchange, is structure. Okay, yeah, see?
Yes.
She's nodding her head for those that can't see.
Oh, sorry, podcast listeners. I was nodding in agreement.
And, structure is very important in the power exchange. So the only way you get structure is through consistency.
Is by doing the thing.
By doing the thing. And to be a leader, and that's my personal look at how a dominant is. A dominant is a leader. All right. You have to show that consistency. You can't expect consistency in chaos.
No, if it's chaotic,
if it's chaotic, you're not going to have that structure. You're not going to feel that structure. So, on that aspect, consistency is very important.
Well, and the structure sets expectations. So,
sure.
As a submissive, if I know what to do, then I will do it. If I know what you want, I will give it to you. I mean, that's how we structure our DS relationship. But if I'm not then getting feedback, or on the side of our DS where you tell me what to do. I mean, there's certain things I have tasks, I have rules, I have things we've negotiated that I know I'm supposed to do.
Sure.
But then there's the other side, and I know we have friends who are kinky who do this a lot, where it's not about necessarily what you have to do, it's what you're told to do. And you're waiting to be told to do something, kinky or otherwise. And without that, when that is inconsistent, you don't know what to expect. You don't know what your dominant wants. And what I want personally as a submissive, more than almost anything, is to give you what you want.
Sure.
But I need to know what that is.
Well, yeah, you can't give somebody what they want if they don't know what it is.
You can try and you will fuck that up. The few times that I have tried to anticipate without clear instruction, wrong.
Right.
I've been wrong. Now, I can anticipate based on past experience, and I can say, oh, this is how we handled it this last time. If I do this again, 50-50 shot of being right.
Yeah.
Maybe 75-25 shot of being right. And that's okay. But when it's something completely new and I try and anticipate and I think I know, sometimes I'm pretty convinced, just as from a sadistic point of view, you'll go, no, that's not what I want. Y'all hear his evil laugh? That's the laugh of a sadist.
Well, I just had a thought unrelated to this morning. I was working the day of recording this, I was working in the shop. And as I said earlier, I was making paddles. So Kayla was out doing her morning errands, bringing the boys to school, and she came home. Now, normally she will walk through the garage and give me a kiss. Now, here I am at the workbench with a stack of paddles, dozen paddles.
Big stack.
She walks to the edge of the garage, looks in, looks at me. I wait for her to walk in. She walks around the other way.
I walk around. In my defense, it was very crowded in that garage.
Well, it is crowded.
And yes, there were also a dozen paddles.
Stack of paddles on the bench, one in my hand.
And
yeah,
he was
she
holding
walked
it
the other
like
way.
he was ready to use it.
And I thought, smart girl. Smart girl. She knows not to tempt the sadist.
Well, that's where anticipation comes from, because
Right.
I do. So, pro tip on consistency: when you are consistent, your submissive will learn you, and they
True.
And I think here's what's funny: here's the other side of consistency. It's sort of an illustration about why consistency really can be important, because you do have the ability to surprise me, because I believe that I do know what to expect. And when you are feeling,
So when I step outside the box,
when you're feeling a little
bam.
sadistic, and it's also why you do a really good mind fuck, because I feel like I know what is going to happen based on past prologue,
what is and what has been.
right? And
Yeah.
so when you change that up on me, yes, you are very much able to fuck with my mind very easily. But okay, so we've yet again gone off the rails.
We wandered a bit. Now, getting back to why consistency matters, one of the biggest, and this to me I think is one of the biggest factors in this, especially when you're developing a new relationship or even entering into a top and bottom type of relationship, is consistency builds trust. Trust is one of the core foundation points in DS. Consistency is one of the best ways to build and maintain that trust. It is such an important factor in that aspect. So, let's face it, if I wasn't consistent and you didn't trust me, would you let me come at you with one of those big ass paddles?
Fuck no. because I wouldn't know what to expect. So that's another thing. Consistency permeates every layer of your DS relationship. So there's consistency in how you treat each other, or how from this perspective, how a dominant approaches a submissive, how they treat their submissive, how they talk to their submissive. There's consistency in action. So that can be on really granular levels and on really, really big levels. So when it comes to a paddle, the reason, if given the option, I'm going to walk around the man with the paddle in his hand is because I know if I get within a certain distance,
arm's length,
pretty much, he's going to smack me on the ass. Now, there's not a damn thing wrong with that from my perspective, but sometimes it's like, I don't know that I'm going to just walk around. Now, I think the one thing you did that I would have said was not consistent. I would have expected you to say, baby girl, come here, please, because that's usually what happens. So you can, there's also a false sense of consistency where you feel like you can predict what's going to happen. And that's what kind of makes things fun, is when you do come out of that a little bit. But it also does let me know. So it lets me know, repeating ourselves, what to expect. But in this case, when we're talking about kinky fuckery and the trust, I know that if he's going to test a new toy on me, he is consistent in how he does that. He does it the same way every time. He starts out a little bit, and I give him my reaction. And then if that reaction is positive, he adds a little bit more force behind it. If that reaction is positive, and he'll keep going until I am clearly saying, okay, I'm done now. That's how, with that heavy paddle that you're experimenting with that particular hard wood, I mean, I think you got to like 5 whacks, like really hard ones before I was like, oh, okay, I'm good. But that's your method. That's your pattern. Yeah. And because you do that all the time with a new toy, even if I'm unsure of a new kinky thing we're going to try, I know how you're going to start this out with me, what the process is going to be, because it's what you do every time.
But see, there is what comes into play, because you don't take a new toy on somebody, even if it's somebody you played with for years. You don't take that new toy and just go
as hard as you can.
As hard as you can, is full on. You start soft, a little harder, a little more, and you build up to see what the reaction is, to see what the, how it does on the person. Which,
in terms of play, makes it easier to play with somebody.
Sure.
Because they're consistent. I feel like this should be a drinking game. How many times do we say consistency in this episode? Oh, no. Somebody would get alcohol poisoning from that. Don't play that drinking game. No, we're not advocating that. No. But then there's consistency within the relationship.
Absolutely.
So if I know, let's take a small thing. When we were long distance.
Yes.
One of the things you were most consistent about was communication.
Absolutely.
Which is probably the biggest inconsistency I hear about from submissives who are having problems with dominance, and it's lack of communication. And not that they won't ever talk to them, but they either...
It's sporadic.
It's either sporadic timing, or it's sporadic where they might get one good deep conversation out of every 20,
We were, as many of you know, in case you don't, we were long distance for 18 months. 440 miles between us. Not a huge distance compared to some, but
big enough.
And we had built a routine that in the morning on my way to work, I would call her. Okay.
You were my wake-up call. I didn't use an alarm clock for 18 months.
I was her alarm. I was her alarm clock, pretty much. You're right. Yeah. And through the entire 18 months of being long distance, that was
Monday through Friday.
The consistency of the weekday. Now, again, at lunchtime, when I took my lunch break, I would call her again. Now, those times were set in stone. She was assured that at that time I was going to call her, and that was where we kind of built our consistency.
And then in the evening, we had an evening call. You would call at the end of the day. And the thing is that not only could I depend on that, and I plan my life around that, but because somebody out there is like, yeah, but what if something happens? Okay, so...
And stuff does happen.
And stuff does happen. Yes. But the consistency was not just in these are set times. It was then in the, oh my gosh, something is happening. I'm going to let you know as soon as possible. And that was both of us. Sometimes it was my life that got in the way. I'm going to let you know as soon as I know. We're going to adjust. I'm going to make it up to you. It was never something happened and I couldn't make that call.
Sucks to be you.
Right. For both of us, and that was partly because of the being long distance and the importance of communication. It was our time to talk to each other.
Sure.
But it was a physically painful thing to think we had disappointed the other one if something did come up, especially if it was work related, or I used to travel a lot for work, and so while I was traveling my schedule was completely off. And but anytime something came up that you couldn't predict, the moment we could get back together and go, oh my gosh, this happened, we felt awful.
Right.
But it was always forgivable for two reasons. One, we were consistent in our schedule. We kept to it because it was important to us. And 2, we communicated when something was going to disrupt the pattern.
Right. And that was something I was going to bring up. Disruptions happen. Now, one of the things with me at that time, my work schedule was just that 3 weeks out of the month, I had a very early start time. Every 4th week, that time changed either earlier.
Right, yeah, that was a weird
either much earlier or
much later.
Much later. She was aware of that. She always knew ahead of time when that schedule was going to flip.
Right, and we planned for it. We adjusted for it.
We planned for it. Now, the big wrench in the gears for me sometimes was our department meetings.
I used to have those too, though, and they liked to do them over lunch. And I was like, "You're fucking with my lunchtime phone call here, people." So, and that's the thing. It's your intention and your execution both matter, but. And so, yes, the more consistent you can be, the better it is for both of you. The more importance you can place on your consistency, the better it is for both of you. Yeah. But nobody should expect perfection, and everybody should expect something to get fucked up, because that's how life works. And that is whether you are long distance and you're navigating that, which I would say consistency is important at all times. But it is never more important than in a long distance relationship, because all you have is what you can depend on the other to provide.
Whether it's a text or an email.
Right.
All right. And I know even for me, as the big D, if I didn't hear from you,
it would worry you.
At a specific time when we were, my mind would get spinning. What's going on? Is she okay? Is she not going to talk to me anymore? Because you don't have that physical
you can't look
connection.
at each other.
You can't look at each other to see what's going on. So it's easy at that point, especially in LDR, long distance, to have those things spin up.
Exactly. And when you're the dominant, not consistently, whatever it is, communicating, providing parameters, doing tasks, whatever it is that's working for your DS relationship, or the agreement that you have with each other, that's what you're doing to your submissive. They are sitting over there. I'm sure at some point they might start finally getting angry. And if you're a submissive out there with a dominant who not only is inconsistent, but when you talk about it with them, we'll be talking about communication in a little bit, they don't seem to care and they're not changing. I hope what you're doing is getting pissed off, because you should. But before you get to anger, and some people go angry first, part of the process, though, is worry. It's first, and I remember this, and I say first, this is my personal process. First was the worry of, oh my gosh, is everything okay? Then I would go, oh my God, have I been dumped? Am I being ghosted? What the hell's happening? Then it would go back to, oh my God, is he dead? Did something awful happen? I mean, I think the very first time after we'd really been talking for a while, when we had a moment, I can't remember who it was. One of us was out of contact unexpectedly. Something had happened. We both had to have the conversation later of, we need a plan in place if something devastating happens to the other. Because how are we going to know? And we don't want to go through that emotional upheaval. So when you are inconsistent about something, and communication is an easy one to point to, as the dominant, what you're doing to your submissive is you're putting them on an emotional roller coaster. So there will be worry, there will be fear, there will be anxiety, there will be anger, there will be heartbreak, there will be all these things that are unnecessary most of the time, because you can fix them all with a little bit of communication. Consistency for sure, strive for that. But when something happens, then it's communication. You always fall back on communication. But I know that there are a lot of people out there. Typically, they are the dominants who want the fantasy of dominance. They want the sexy fun part, and they don't want the responsibility of it, who talk good game. And when their submissive does what, of course, we're going to recommend that you do, talk to your dominant, they say the right things, go, yeah, absolutely. And yet they almost never follow through, or they follow through for like a couple days, and they do what they say they'll do, and then they stop being consistent.
Right, and that's a big thing. That's the other thing I hear a lot about submissive saying, well, I perform my task, I perform my chore for my dominant, I let him know it was done, and I got the sound of crickets.
Right, nothing. And then, and it happens in so many different ways. So some dominants just sort of drop off the radar. They drop off the radar completely, and then they come back a couple days later, and their poor submissive's like, where the fuck have you been? They might not say it like that. I think you should say it like that. Or you're doing exactly that as a submissive. You're sending those text messages or those emails or those whatever to say, hey, I've done this thing, I've done this thing, I've done this thing. You're getting nothing back to indicate that they recognize it. And then it's like a week or two later. And then they're like, oh, you're supposed to be doing XYZ. Well, what's your incentive to do XYZ if you don't get anything in return?
The onus at that point is on the big D for the consistency. Yes, life gets busy. Things happen unexpectedly. I'm not gonna lie. When I go out in the morning and I'm working in the shop, okay, I get focused, all right, and everything else just kind of falls by the wayside. I'm just in my zone. But you know what? If you want that submissive to continue serving you, to do the things and fulfill your needs, you need to give back. When they send you that message that Daddy, I said my mantra, or sir, I performed the morning ritual, whatever it is, it doesn't take much to send a good girl.
Well, and there's a lot of different ways for that. Yeah. So here's one. So this is where it comes back to the submissive. If you know that your dominant has expectations for you, you've agreed to do them, it's a thing you've consented to, and they are focused on something else, it's your responsibility to do that thing. It's your responsibility to let them know how, whatever your agreement is, right? And for us, it's I let you know. I go, hey, I've done whatever it is, right?
Right.
What I don't expect an immediate response. He's working. He's doing a thing. Okay, fine. I expect at some point, because of how he is, I'll get some acknowledgement. Here's another one, though. So, consistent. The rule is, I don't wear panties unless I have permission, and John Brownstone has picked them out. That's our thing. That's our rule. Okay. For a while, I was in a conundrum because I'd gotten very used to him just always picking them out, and I never had to say anything. Okay? And then he stopped. But there were moments I was like, fuck, I really, really need some panties, and he's not picking them out. And is that because he just doesn't want me to wear them? We hadn't had a conversation, right? So at that point, instead of sitting there not understanding what's going on and really needing some panties, it is on me. It is my responsibility to say something. Now, then what matters is his response. So I say, Daddy, I could really use some panties. Now, I do have to. This is part of our thing. I have to be able to justify it, because just because I want to wear panties is not necessarily a reason.
That's not going to get it, no.
Crotch sweat that goes through your pants in Florida, that's a reason to wear panties.
That's a really big concern.
That's way more than y'all probably ever wanted to know about my crotch, but there you go. But, so the routine now is, he's busy. I have to tell him early in the day, like 5 o'clock in the morning when we wake up, 5:30 in the morning when we wake up, hey, Daddy, I'm going to need panties for the day. If I do that, he will do what I expect him to do.
I will pick them out for her.
Right. He will not ignore me. He will not purposely forget me.
There are times the night before, when we go to bed, Daddy, I'm going to need panties for the next day. I will pick them out that night. Now, on a few occasions, it's kind of fallen through the cracks, and once I'm in the shop and I'm covered in man glitter,
don't pick up my panties, please.
I am not coming in the house to pick up panties until I clean up.
Please don't pick up my panties. So, don't put glitter on them. Wait, sawdust. Sawdust. Okay. Glitter in my panties sounds fun.
Yes.
Wait. Anyway, off the rails again. We are off the rails.
So came of that has become established in those cases. If I am already out in the shop working, she gets to pick them out. But like in the old days of being long distance, she has to send me a picture.
But the thing is, and it's a weird kind of consistency. The consistency is the expectation. The consistency is the rule/protocol. I do not wear panties that my daddy has not picked out or has given me permission to pick out. It's all permission based. So even when life gets a little topsy-turvy, up and down, oh, I forgot. Oh, he's not thinking about it. He's doing something else. We developed a different system to maintain the consistency of that part of our relationship.
Right.
And because it was something that was still important to him, he went with it. We were like, yeah, we won't change the rule. We'll change how we do it.
We'll modify how we do it in those cases, yes.
So when the thing you're trying to make consistent is a certain protocol, a certain rule, a certain task, a certain way of doing something in your relationship, when life gets in the way, because it will, right? Or when things change, maybe your schedule changes, or maybe the way you do things changes, you can maintain the consistency of that aspect of your DS relationship and just change how you do it and just modify how you do it. And sometimes submissives, that will be on you to be the one to go, hey, I'm noticing this isn't necessarily working the way it used to. Can we talk about it? You know, and figure out a path forward together. I mean, I hesitate when we talk about how important it is for dominance to be consistent to act like the submissives just lay back and wait for something. And we have to both be actively engaged in this relationship.
Sure, and that goes back to what I said earlier, that it's the consistency goes both ways on both sides of the slash.
It does. But like you also said earlier, when you're the leader, and this is the responsibility of being a dominant, you want to be in charge, you have to like move these things forward.
That's a very good point, the responsibility. Willing to be consistent shows that you take this seriously and you're willing to accept the responsibility.
Exactly. Are we getting a John Brownstone rant? Wow. And I know it does. It drives you batty, and it drives me batty too, because what we do is we hear from the submissives who are like, well, this is how we started our relationship. This is what I agreed to do. This is what I want. This is what my dominant said they want. But now I can't get them to return my calls. I can't get them to follow through. The other one is, and I think this is a little bit of human nature. It might be more of a masochist thing. It might even be more of a brat thing. But this is what I've seen, okay? And I'm not trying to paint a broad brush. Not everybody's like this. But this is what I've seen. I've seen it with my own children, too, okay? When the person in charge stops following through, stops giving praise, stops correcting problems, some people will act out more in order to try to get attention. Like, I mean, I have seen some submissives,
even though it's negative attention, they still want that attention.
So there are definitely submissives, and I'm one of them. If you are not paying the fuck attention to me, I'm gonna stop. I'm done.
Her sassiness breaks the
it goes the other way.
It goes off the scale.
It goes the other way, and I'm like, fuck you, no. But some people will push the envelope to go, well, maybe if I just do more and more and more, I will elicit a response and a reaction. In the case of those submissives for whom discipline is very important, where they want the correction, there are submissives out there that absolutely what they want is to be told, you've done it right, you've done it wrong. When they fuck up, they want to be corrected. That's a thing, okay?
Right.
Nothing wrong with that. But if you've got an inconsistent dominant, some people will go the way of just not doing it at all, but others will either do it wrong or purposely not do it in hopes that that will get their dominant's attention and they'll get correction.
Well, think about it. In a good analogy is you work in an office, all right? You have a manager who is very consistent with their leadership style. And things in the office flow and everybody gets their work done. They hand out praise, everything's good. You have the opposite of that, a manager who is not consistent, never hands out praise. How do you feel?
Right, you feel like it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So, you at that point, then it comes to you don't want to be there anymore. Right. Well, it doesn't matter to him. Now, I know, just like you said, some will say, well, yes, I'm still going to do the best job that I can.
Sure.
But I guarantee you, even if you're doing the best job you can, you're not going to feel fulfilled inside.
And you're not really doing the best job you can. So there's a lot of ways this can go. So some people will push the envelope hoping to get correction because that's kind of what they're into as a submissive. Others will keep doing everything they're supposed to be doing, hoping beyond hope that they will get attention for that they will get the praise that they want, or whatever it is the feedback is that they want for doing what they're supposed to do as a submissive. And then what will happen is they will become demoralized the longer it goes on, where they've got this inconsistent dominant who either sees it and doesn't care, or doesn't see it because they're not paying attention, or sees it and doesn't care, right? Like, I mean, it can be all kinds of things. And so even your top performer, like in that workplace analogy, I have been that top performer, and I promise you, when the boss was shitty, I was telling myself I was a top performer, but I was cutting corners all over the place because who the fuck cared? And then that's the other direction you go, is you go, well, it doesn't matter what I do. I'm not going to do any of it because
no matter what I do is good enough. Yeah.
The boss isn't even paying attention. They don't care, and they care inconsistently. And the problem with that is that and this is why I tend not to be like this in any environment, because here's my luck. That boss, that dom who's not paying attention, didn't see the 10 times that I didn't do a thing. The 11th time I didn't do a thing, that's when the fuck they noticed. Then I get in trouble. And I don't like that. So, but I mean, it can go so many different ways, but the whole point of it is, however you're reacting, whether you're trying to get the attention, even if it's negative attention, whether you're pushing forward, trying to do everything you're supposed to do, but feeling demoralized more and more every day, or whether you just give up and go fuck it. It's all a recipe for disaster. It's an unhealthy DS situation for you as the submissive who wants a relationship that works.
Being consistent is a big part of the foundation of your house, on your house of kink.
So let's talk about what it means to be consistent, because first of all, there are a million and one ways to be consistent, so we can't name all of them.
Right.
But the big ones. So we've talked about communication. So consistency in communication is dependent upon your situation. So long distance relationships, we're going to say figuring out a schedule, I guess, and trying to stick to it as best you can, right?
Best as you can.
When you're living together or when you're close by, communication is less on a schedule. It's more as an
ongoing thing,
ongoing as needed basis.
Right.
But there should be, you might not be having deep conversations every day, but the days of barely seeing one another and not talking, because that happens. We have days where you don't see one another.
Right.
But if the days where you're barely in each other's presence and barely speaking are outweighing the days where the opposite is true, that's going to be a problem. If you are the type of person who wants and needs praise, we've talked about that before.
Oh, yes.
We have also talked about gratitude. I don't think gratitude should be a thing you have to ask for. I think it should be a thing that's given from both sides. But consistently acknowledging the good things your submissive does for you, consistently saying thank you. I don't mean always saying thank you, but on a regular basis, acknowledging what they're doing on your behalf.
And on the opposite side of that coin is also following through on discipline when it's needed.
When they don't do what they're supposed to do.
I mean, you can't just let
things slide. And you don't want to just be consistent on the positive. You definitely want to be consistent on the positive side. But if you're...
There has to be, as far as that goes, between praise and discipline, there has to be a balance.
Right.
There has to be a happy medium, a middle ground met on that.
Now, if you do follow the discipline side, and not every DS relationship does, it's not a requirement.
Right.
You need to stay within the parameters of what you've negotiated. So it's not just that you need to consistently follow through when something doesn't get done as a dominant. You also need to consistently use the tools that your submissive has agreed to that you can use. You can't just come out of fucking nowhere with something that they have not consented to. They get to say no to that shit. So don't do that. But if one day I get away with not making his coffee and he doesn't say a fucking thing. I know, right? Nobody wants that. If I get away with it one day and then the next day I go, well, I got away with it, so I guess I don't have to do it. And then the next day he like jumps my ass over it, that sends so many mixed messages.
Yes.
Like, I don't know how to respond to that. And now I have hurt feelings because where were you on day one?
Mm-hmm.
And why are you pissed off on day two? You should have said something
What's
on day
so
one.
different about today that wasn't there yesterday?
Right.
On the other side of that coin, I mean, every time before we record, Kayla makes me a cup of coffee.
I do.
All right? And I never fail in one way or another to say thank you. Whether I say thank you, baby girl, or like today she was in the kitchen making it, I walked up behind her and kissed her neck.
You can kiss my neck anytime you want, Daddy.
So, you know, it doesn't have to be a constant gushing of thank yous.
No.
You know, but just a simple show of appreciation.
And here's the thing, because he's so consistent with that, when he doesn't, now part of this is because I'm a sassy baby girl, but I'm gonna like...
No, not you.
I know, right? I'm gonna make a face. I'm gonna be like, anything wrong? Everything okay over there? Something you wanna... forgot to mention? Like, I'm at a point in our relationship.
She'd be like,
where's
John Brownstone and what have you done with him?
Or I'll treat you like one of the kids. I'll be like, and what do you say? I would do that one time and only joking.
Yeah.
I would not do that seriously. Now, part of that is the comfort level. It is because he behaves towards me in a very consistent manner. So that's another part of consistency, mood. Now, let's get real serious about mood. Some people...
Gonna set the mood?
No. Oh. Some people there's mood disorders. There are people with mental health issues where it absolutely affects your mood, and your mood cannot always be consistent. That is legitimate. That is a thing that has to be navigated, and yeah, that sucks. Ask me how I know. John Brownstone navigates it like Indiana Jones, quite frankly. You set off all the traps, but then you get out of the way of them somehow. So those things are very real, and those things can impact consistency. But when you have a comfort level with each other, you can usually learn to read those changes.
Right.
But consistency of how you behave and respond to your submissive goes a long way in building that comfort level, in knowing, especially from a submissive perspective, when can I tease? When do I need to stay in protocol? Right. When do I need to tread lightly and be careful? You know, all of those things. So that's a learning process.
Oh yeah, that's an ongoing process. I mean, that's something I've learned through our relationship.
Sure.
You know, navigating her moods, her mental health.
But even your own moods. We all have moods, y'all.
Right.
So I have learned that if he's really tired, or if he's really cranky, or if he's really this or really that, like certain moods.
Grumpy polar bear,
that is not the time to have an in-depth conversation about the state of our relationship. Okay, that's not the moment. It might also not be the moment to tease. I also know before the first sip of coffee, don't ask a question. You're not going to like the answer. If you're asking for permission, it's an automatic no. So those are things we have to learn about each other. So I'm not saying that as a dominant, you have to be always the same all the time. That's not realistic. However, if you are one moment finding a behavior really, really cute, really, really funny, really, really this, really, really that, and the next moment with no notice or warning or explanation, to your submissive at least, you hate it or you're getting mad at them, you have just set them completely off guard. And I know that there are dominants out there who really like that, and I'm sure there are submissives out there who find that like a turn on. If that's your thing and you've negotiated that and talked about that, that's cool, okay. But the rest of us, that's gonna throw us the fuck off. And as a submissive, it is very hard to learn to not only trust you as the dominant, but to even trust myself as a submissive. How do I know if I'm ever doing the right thing or a good job if one moment I get praised for something and then I do it again at another time and I I get a different reaction. So if you don't have an underlying reason why you might have those fluctuations and you're just doing it because you think it doesn't matter, I'm telling you it matters.
Would you say that a dominant who is consistent with you as a submissive builds confidence?
I think so, because it's right up there with stability and expectations. If I know what those things are, if I know what your expectations are, if I know the parameters of our relationship, a lot of people think of parameters and limits as sorry to use the same word in the definition, as a limiting thing, as a thing that sort of constricts around you. And I have found the opposite to be true. Once you give me my limits and I know where the boundaries are, how far I can push,
right,
what'll get me in trouble, what'll break protocol, what's not acceptable. Once I know those boundaries, to me, that's the time to explore within those boundaries. It's the time to, how much more helpful can I be? Because I know I'm allowed to go up to this point. Like the panty thing. I do not wear panties without permission, right? So knowing that, but knowing that's the limit. And because you are consistent and because we have good communication.
Right.
I knew that to be the best submissive I could be, I could find ways to be helpful for that. Being helpful and serving is to say, hey, Daddy, I need panties today, so that you don't have to try and be a mind reader. You don't have to think about it every day. You only have to think about it when I'm saying something. Now, there are days where you're like, I want you to wear a pair of panties today. These are the ones I want you to wear, right?
Correct.
And that's your thing. And as our protocol, that okay. But I'm serving when I know that within our dynamic, I can make a suggestion to help move you forward in being the dominant you want to be while staying within my own rules. That is a very convoluted way of trying to explain it. And I don't know if I made I make sense to me. Doesn't mean anybody else got that. So, but by knowing what to expect, by knowing what the rules are, by knowing or believing I know how you will react to things, within the boundaries that we've set, that we've agreed to, that I consent to, that we've negotiated, you make me feel free to be submissive and help you be the best dominant you can be in that way. So it means that I know that I can remind you of a thing. And you're not going to bite my head off because I reminded you. You know that, that thing was important. And also, she's not going to do it without permission. And so she's not topping from the bottom. She's not telling me. She's helping me be consistent. She's helping me do the thing that we both say we want to do. Because you are consistent in your behavior towards me.
Right.
I know how I can speak to you. I know how far I can go. I know when I can make a decision without you and when I can't. We have not renegotiated, but we have changed a little bit of the financial power exchange we've got, right?
We've fine-tuned it
we
in
have
a little different
fine-tuned
ways,
it.
yes.
And so now, because of the way we do things, slightly differently than we did before, we have an episode way back in the archive about that.
Yeah.
I ask for more permission before I spend money. And yet I also know what I don't have to ask permission for. Because you are so consistent with me and we talk about these things so much, I know what the outer limits and the boundaries are.
There are certain things that for her are a given. Her hair, her wax, those things
gas
she does.
In my car.
Gotta have gas in your car, ain't going nowhere. And those are certain things that are given. She does not have to ask. It was a one-off agreement, so to speak.
Sure.
Okay. Those are things that you want to do for your own thing. And it's like, yeah, fine. Those are your things. You do not have to check in with me every time for this.
Right. But see, that this is where consistency can come into play here. So I know what I can spend without permission. We've already had these conversations. I know then that means anything outside of that, I need to say something. Right. So if you were not consistent, here's how that might look. I might go get my hair done and put it on the card and not say anything because that's our agreement. You see the expense and you start freaking out over it. And you want to know why I didn't ask. Excuse me, I don't have to ask.
Right.
Or you can go the other way. I say, hey, I need to get this thing that's not a predetermined thing we always get. It's extra, it's special. Can I? And the response, the inconsistent response would be, why the fuck are you asking me? Whatever, I don't care. Well, now I'm standing on shifting sand. I'm not standing on solid ground because does that mean I don't have to ask in the future? Does that mean that these specific purchases are now within my purview, or does it mean that it doesn't matter? Like, what does that mean? And that's where inconsistency can fuck you up.
Right.
You don't even know what rules you're living by anymore. You don't know what your DS is based on anymore because you were operating under a set of negotiated rules, but because your dominant is being inconsistent with them, well, what matters? What do I do? And then if you take that information and say to yourself, okay, this means I don't have to ask for this, or this means I do have to ask for that.
Right.
And then you start living under that new parameter of, oh, now I have to ask for this thing. And you do. And the next time they're like, why the fuck are you asking me? Well, Jesus, God, how the hell do you keep up? Now, here's the fix to all that.
How do you keep up?
Here's the fix to all that. And short of throwing that one back out and getting another one, because sometimes they're good doms. They just need some help, okay? And sometimes they're going through shit and they're not talking to you. And sometimes it's that they don't know yet. They're too new. There's all kinds of reasons. And sometimes they're just shitty doms and you really should toss that one out and go get you another one. But the first step to fixing this is always communication.
Yeah.
If I perceive, rightly or wrongly, that he's being inconsistent and something's not making sense to me, I'm going to try and ask right then. But, you know, reality being what it is, maybe I can't. But the first chance I get him and go, you remember that thing? That problem, that moment we had the other day, has something changed? Do you want to do something different? A couple times you have been that way where I thought I was working under this set of rules and then your reaction was not what I expected. And that's a moment, especially when you're in a primarily good, healthy relationship, that's the moment for a check-in. Whoa, hey, are we on the same page? How is this working? Did I misunderstand something? Did you misunderstand something?
Right.
As a dominant, you have to be humble enough to admit that maybe you misunderstood something. It is not always your submissive who did not understand.
As a dominant, just wearing the title of dominant does not make you infallible.
No, you are not always right just because you get to be the big D. It doesn't work that way.
And part of being good leader is being willing to step up when you're wrong and admit when you're wrong.
Right. And
it happens.
And there have been times where I thought we were doing one thing. You thought we were doing something else. We came together and worked it backwards to figure out what that conversation was.
Yes.
And sometimes it's me that has to go, ooh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood. And sometimes it's you that goes,
sometimes it's me.
I misunderstood.
And then we work it out and move forward.
So part of the communication is a check-in to go, are we operating on the same page here? Or have I misunderstood? Have you, where are we going with this? The other type of communication is to say to your dominant, this is not this thing right here that's happening. You know, the fact that you don't call when you say well, or the fact that you're not following up when I'm following this rule that we set, but you're not following back up with me, or whatever it might be. You have to let them know this is a problem. Okay. The dominant who really cares and wants to do better will make an effort. Might not be perfect at it. They might struggle a little bit. They're going to try. The dominant that needs to be tossed back into the FetLife cesspool, they might talk good game, but they're not going to make an effort.
There's a FetLife cesspool?
I think it's called FetLife. That's not true.
Come on. Dude.
There's some really good people on FetLife.
Yes, there are.
But God, there is some really bad ones. So you have to address that as a submissive as being a problem that needs to be looked at. Sometimes, especially if it's the personality of that dominant that's not a natural skill that they have, that maybe they are disorganized and maybe they've got a lot going on. There are sometimes ways as a submissive, like we talked about with the panty thing, that you can use your submission to help them.
Yes.
I don't want anybody to become another human being's doormat, though. And so what I would say is, if as a submissive you choose to go that route where in order to help your dominant be more consistent with you and to maintain your protocols, you find ways where you take on more tasks or you take on more responsibility to get these things done or to follow through or whatever, there has to be some kind of fulfilling reward for you. You need to be getting something out of it that makes you feel good as a submissive. Your dominant needs to appreciate the fuck out of you at bare minimum, okay? You are not there to become that person, and you don't use this term in the kinky way, to become that person's slave. If you want to be their kinky slave, that is so cool. Go for it.
That's a whole different thing.
That's a whole different thing. What I'm talking about is you should not be carrying the weight of your DS relationship as the submissive.
No.
Okay? Your dominant has a responsibility to learn how to step up and do better, but if part of it is a way they sort of move through the world or things they don't know yet, you are helping them as they become better. You are finding the methods that work for you both, and they are taking on that responsibility. Cool. If you are the one driving this whole fucking relationship and they're sitting back and letting you, that's a problem.
Right. And that's a good segue into the next point I want to make.
Oh, okay.
Consistency, being consistent is work.
Yes. Oh, God,
Okay?
yeah.
It takes effort. And in order to be consistent on a consistent basis.
So glad we canceled the drinking game.
Use tools. Okay? It doesn't make you less of a dominant, it makes you a better dominant. You have things like Google Calendar, set alarms on your phone, Trello, Evernote. Myself, I sometimes use my baby girl submissive.
Sometimes. Oh, now here's how this infinite loop works. So we're recording on Thursday. Wednesday, John Brownstone took the boys to school for me.
Yes.
Okay, which is not normally how I do it. And he said to me the night before, "Hey, baby girl, I'm going to want a coffee before we go. Will you make sure to make it?" Of course, Daddy. So here's the loop. Daddy, will you remind me that I need to make this coffee for you? Yes, baby girl. So I then promptly forgot all the fuck about it. And the next morning, he's getting ready. God, y'all were about to leave. He goes, baby girl. No, this was too early. He goes, baby girl, I'm going to need my coffee this morning. This is your reminder. Okay, Daddy, not a problem. It's an hour later. He goes, baby girl, we're about to leave. I'm going to need my coffee now.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So,
and that was, and let me say this about that good point that you brought up. Because she did not have that done immediately, all right, I was not upset about that because it was completely outside of the norm of what we do.
Yeah.
All right. So, I could not be upset with her, so I had no problem reminding you about it.
Right.
Because it was outside of our normal routine.
Even the fact that you use me as a reminder, or I use you as a reminder, that is still consistent with who we are. That's part of the habits that we form. So some consistencies are habits. They are habits you have to form. They are new habits that maybe you never had before. This is a new DS relationship. You've got to now build them. And until, if we switch things up tomorrow, and his new thing was he took the boys to school every morning, and every morning he wanted a coffee when he went, on top of the coffee he drinks when he wakes up, Let's not be crazy. Okay. The first...
Pro-caffeination.
The first couple of times, he would give me leeway. He would remind me, because it's a new thing that a new habit for me too. Now, because it's a new habit for him, he might not remember to remind me. He might not remember there might come a point where he doesn't necessarily acknowledge, or something happens.
Right.
As a submissive, you're learning to consistently do a new thing, and the dominant is learning to consistently see that a new thing is being done.
Right.
A part of it is habits, and it's training yourself or training your submissive, if you're the dominant, to do these things and to get used to them.
Right.
And it reminds me of something I was told that has nothing to do with kink, but the way it's a band thing. So anybody who is ever in band might recognize this. The way you practice is the way you perform. So what I have learned is while it's normal to stumble when you first start a new thing, if you consistently stumble, that will become your habit. So if I consistently forget something, I will probably always forget it. It will never be top of mind. If he consistently never said thank you or never did a thing that would be something he would normally do, if that became his new habit, then what would be consistent is that he's not doing what he normally does when I do a task for him that he likes, like showing gratitude or acknowledging a thing or whatever. So it's kind of it's a little bit of a mind fuck when you start thinking about consistency and the things you do. They are habits, and the way you start out doing them, if you don't catch yourself, especially if you're kind of fucking it up, it could be how you always do it, and that could be a problem. And now you got to train yourself in a new habit. Right. And so for some, I don't want it to be like we're picking on all the dominants out there, because it is very possible that you never recognized from the very beginning. You didn't recognize how important consistency was, and so you practiced badly, and you started out not doing things that now that you know better, you've been doing this longer, and your submissive has been listening to us long enough and is going, oh, I got some shit we need to talk about. I'm proud, quite frankly. If this show has inspired submissives to go, oh no, we're going to need to sit down over a cup of coffee and deal with this, I'm good with that. I'm totally okay with that. But so what that might mean is that now you have to learn new ways of doing things.
Right.
And you've got to create new habits for yourself in order to be consistent.
Correct.
Yeah. There you go. I think that made a little bit of sense.
It did, in a roundabout way. Yeah, it did.
Everything I say makes sense in a roundabout way. If you just squint and hold your head to the side, everything about me makes sense.
Yes.
I feel like this has been the most off-the-rails episode we've ever done.
Probably up there in the top 5, yeah.
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 Do you feel like you said everything that you want to say about consistency?
I think we've covered a good bit.
I would love for some enterprising person out there to figure out how many times we said the words consistent or consistency. I don't know if I want to know, but
probably not.
Part of me wants to know.
Probably not. Bottom
line, consistency does not mean perfection.
No.
Consistency is from a submissive perspective and from one submissive's perspective. So we don't all feel the same way. We're not a monolith around here. But to me, and for our DS relationship, consistency is kind of the glue. Like, I know what we're supposed to be doing.
Right.
I know what we want to be doing. And the cool thing is when things are rocking along and everything's consistent, we move forward together in the same direction towards where we want to be. And when things stop being consistent and I speak up, or sometimes you speak up, somebody speaks up and says, things aren't quite right here, then we can correct course and get back on track and go down the path that we're trying to get to. And so without it, everything starts crumbling. Everything starts falling apart. Feelings get hurt. People feel bad. It's not working. It's not growing. Ugh. And when you are consistent as a dominant and in your expectations and the way you treat your submissive and what you ask of them and all of that, then everybody grows together. And if it's meant to be a good, healthy relationship, it becomes
it will flourish,
that. Yes.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I think
that's it.
I think that's it. We've covered a good deal.
Oh, if y'all followed along from the beginning, more power to you. You might want to, maybe we should have kept this a drinking game. I don't know. I feel like it went way off the rails, but that's okay. Yeah. Hopefully if you just pulled even one thing out of it that is useful to you, especially if you either are a dominant who knows that's a weakness of yours, or you are a submissive who's been putting up with an inconsistent dominant, then maybe you can course correct. Or like I said, maybe you can go, no, that won't work. Let's get a new model. Sometimes you got to get a new model.
Sometimes.
I'm not. This is my model. Named John Brownstone.
Good.
Yeah. No returns, no refunds, no takebacks.
Sucks to be you. You're stuck with me now, kid.
I got the extended warranty.
Oh. Okay.
So, anyway. Just because this is kind of kind of a complex topic, I think. If you have thoughts, opinions, experiences with it, tricks, tips, feel free to reach out.
Love to hear it.
The show notes on the website, lovingbdsm.net, it's a blog post, so there's a comment section. You can talk to us down there. You can talk to us on social media. If you're watching on YouTube, you can talk to us in the comments. But feel free. Even if you don't agree, even if there's some point we made that you don't agree with, feel free to talk about it. We talk to anybody who's not an asshole.
Yeah.
That's pretty much how we roll with that.
Right.
So, yeah, we are going to have a bonus section.
Yes.
Yay.
All right.
And that will probably be just as off the rails, but
probably.
that's sort of the point.
Yeah. It's how we roll.
It is how we roll.
All right.
Okay.
We good?
Maybe. I don't know.
Sometimes. Most of the
we
time.
try.
Well, do our best. All right.
Keep it kinky, y'all. And we'll see you next week.
Yeah.
Daddy.
Yes, baby girl.
Can't talk to the crickets.
You want to talk to the crickets.
I'm talking to the crickets. The crickets make me so happy. Crickets do make me so happy.
Okay.
I do. This whole episode feels like we're off the rails. Okay. We
have
got mail. I'm going to try and do it. See if I can do it.
Ooh, look at you. Look at you.
I can kind of do it. Okay. Poor podcast listeners. What the fuck is she doing? I was trying to put the
postcard in the camera.
In the camera frame so people on YouTube can see it.
And
Sorry.
she actually pulled it off.
I did. It's only taken how many episodes of having a camera on? And it's actually it's our card 2 of 2. I don't know if you remember a few weeks ago, we got a postcard from some kinky listeners who were meeting like halfway around the world to get to see one another.
Yes.
And so the second postcard came from Stockholm, Sweden. And that is awesome. And they are both crickets. And it says, thank you guys for great and helpful podcast. You are welcome. And we love mail. The other mail we got this week are things to try.
Yes.
We're going to have another review video coming up at some point in the next few weeks. And it's kinky gear. It's collar and cuffs. Very excited. And then I got a book in the mail that I've also got an ebook in my email I need to read. And I have some other stuff I want to try. Yay.
You're a busy gal.
I am a busy gal. So, most of the stuff we have to talk about, we'll probably end up talking about over on Patreon.
True.
Because it's business stuff.
Yeah.
Personal stuff, it's been quiet.
It has. It has been quiet.
Quiet is not bad, though.
No, not in a bad way. Things have just been kind of flowing along for us.
Yeah, last week was rough.
Yeah.
Last week was rough. And this week I've been recovering from last week, but now we're recording on Thursday, and I'm better.
Last week was a jumble of juggling schedules.
Well, and this week was too. I have
not as bad, nowhere near as bad as last week.
No, but I did overschedule myself. So last week it was pediatrician's appointments and hair and wax and other things that I personally needed to get done. Did not do any of those things at the pediatrician's office, don't worry. This week, it's parent-teacher conference and eye appointments for children and therapy and just lots of appointments that I thought by spreading them out over several days was a good idea. That was like the worst idea ever. Oh, and I had a doctor's appointment this week.
Yes.
Yeah, so it was just a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm so far behind on my work schedule, but I know next week I have no appointments, so it'll be fine. Technically, next week I have to make sure that I do not work on Thursday, the 25th.
That's correct.
That's next week. We talked about that last week in the bonus section.
Yes.
So I do have to juggle my schedule next week, but that's totally worth it.
That'll be totally worth it.
That's worth it.
That's something I am so looking forward to.
I know. I've been thinking about it, and I'll be curious to see how, if at all, the club that we'll be going to, because we've not been there in a very long time, has changed. And then I've already been thinking about, well, which piece of equipment are we going to play on? Are we going to be on a spanking bench? Are we going to be on a St. Andrew's cross? What are we going to do?
Right.
I don't even know which one I would prefer at this point.
Or do I just lock you in the cage?
No, that's not fun for me. That is not at all. I mean, the idea of a cage as part of some kinky scene, yeah, that could be fun for me. But if we're going for ass beating, the cage is not where I want to be. I want to be like, however you need to reach all the sensitive bits that you can hit. That is what I want to be. And that's really all I care about. So next week, we'll have to record the episode in some time travel fashion.
Yes.
Because Thursdays, we've gotten into our habit of recording on Thursdays.
Right.
And that, not sure what kind of episode would happen after.
With you in subspace.
Yeah, because I'll probably want a freaking nap.
Yes.
So yeah, I don't know how
You'll
that'll
need
work.
coffee, food, and a nap.
In that order. Yeah, no.
Yeah,
Food, coffee, and then a nap. And I know somebody out there's going, how the hell are you going to have coffee and a nap? Watch me.
She'll figure it out.
So yeah, I mean, it's just we're sort of ticking along. There's a lot of stuff
Right.
going on, but it's mostly work stuff.
Work-related stuff. I've got another show this weekend.
I know.
This one's down in St. Pete.
Yeah, at another bar.
Yeah.
I love the fact that there are places in this world where they're like, it's a bar, but we're going to set up a craft show in it. I think that's cool. That's,
I know.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, they're at the same time they're doing a ice cream social.
Oh goodness. Well, okay. You gonna have some ice cream?
Yeah,
I thought you were low carbing it.
I am.
You're still gonna have some ice cream.
I'm gonna have a little bit, especially if it's they have some chocolate chip mint.
Well, sure. You can't pass that up.
Right.
Now we are truly just rambling.
I know.
We are saying nothing of value to anybody.
No.
So I guess that means it's time to go.
I guess so.
I don't know how I feel about this week's episode.
Okay.
Because I feel like I personally was not at all organized. You can tell, I think, when I have not been chewing over a topic in my head. But, and I have not. Because it's not something I have to worry about. Because you are consistent. And when you are not consistent, I have the freedom to go, hey, what the fuck? And then we move on.
True.
So I have not been chewing on this topic.
No, you haven't.
And so I feel like I personally just went around in circles. I don't know if I made any sense to anybody out there this week.
We'll see.
Hopefully
so.
We'll see.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Is that it for us?
I think so.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
We love you.